Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Joe Gould. I am a defense reporter here at Politico, and I'm thrilled to be moderating our next panel, where we're going to be discussing looming decisions facing Congress. Join me welcoming our panelists, Congressman Joe Courtney, the ranking member on the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee, and Congressman Rob Wittman, House Armed Services Vice Chairman and Chairman of the Air and Land Forces Subcommittee.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Joe.
It's great to be with you guys after, we've spoken plenty of times in the hallways and in Congress, and also it's nice to have you both because, as probably a number of people here know, the two of you are known as partners on sea power and related issues. I wanted to first go to the news of the day. We've got a funding deadline coming up at the end of the week, several days from a potential shutdown. Will Democrats vote for Speaker Mike Johnson's CR? And as a follow-up, will that cost him later with hard-right conservatives who are not in favor of that CR? So first I'll go to you.
Sure. So, well, this Democrat will vote for it. And I honestly am pretty bullish on the fact that I think we're going to have a substantial number that will join me in that effort. No CR is ideal. There's just no question that's not a good way to budget. But obviously the alternative of shutting down the government, which is hours away, Chuck Schumer has signaled that the Senate Democrats are prepared to support it. Really time's run out and we've just got to get it done. I would note also that there was included in the CR a really healthy anomaly for the Columbia SSBN program, which again is a critical time-sensitive program, and that's going to keep the production line going and actually start the funding for submarine number 2, USS Wisconsin, which again I think is also critical. We can't lose time on that program.
And
yeah, listen, I think members on our side look at it and say there needs to be opportunities for us to reduce spending, but they also understand too that the time frame that Speaker Johnson has had to really get appropriations bills through has been truncated just by the whole 3-week process to select a speaker. So I think people are mindful of that. I think they also want some assurances of what will happen going forward with appropriations bills. So that's why you're seeing this week too the continual consideration of appropriations bills. So I think that there is still a lot of goodwill in the conference towards Speaker Johnson, wanting to give him some room as far as what he needs to do to be able to get things done. So I think that that mindset is throughout most of our conference.
How much goodwill does he have? If he's burning through goodwill here, does he say later on with the NDAA? Also as a social conservative, does he have to take more hardline positions and stand up for some of the more socially conservative language that maybe the folks thought would have to come out of the bill? Is he going to stand up for that now? Is he hemmed in?
Well, I just talked to him about 30 minutes ago. He's committed to make sure we get the NDAA done. Chairman Rogers is committed to make sure that all the conferees are part of the discussions with the Senate, so kind of break them up into smaller groups to talk about some of the thornier issues to make sure we're able to work through those. I know the Speaker is committed to get NDAA done. I do know that he understands what he has to balance there in the interest of the entire conference, as well as what has to be done in order to get it through not just the House but the Senate. But I think he's focused on making sure that we get it done in a form that gets as many votes on our side of the aisle as possible.
Actually, I just note that Mike actually was a member of the House Armed Services Committee. He actually was on Sea Power when Rob and I were sort of co-chairing the subcommittee, and so he, I think, actually has got the muscle memory of voting for bipartisan NDAAs, and I'm hopeful anyway that is going to stick with him and make sure that we continue the winning streak for NDAA.
Can I just ask, anybody want to vent any frustration at the Senate? They haven't voted to go to conference for the NDAA. Is it likelier now that we're going to wind up going to a ping pong where and maybe I'll leave to one of you to explain how that works, but rather than a conference where where the Senate elects its representatives to negotiate with the House's representatives and come to a compromise?
Well, just from a time frame and how the Senate operates, if they don't assign and go to conference by the end of this week, it makes it incredibly difficult to get it done before the end of the year without the ping pong, as you said, and that is members of staff going back and forth about the provisions that we have differences on and trying to find a way forward, and then consulting with, as it's called, the Big Four, the chairman and ranking member, House and Senate. So that's a more likely scenario if we don't get a motion to go to conference this week out of the Senate.
So, I mean, the staff, as again, I think a lot of the audience knows, I mean, they've been working on this for 2 months. And, there's actually, I think, been a real narrowing of the issues that need to sort of get flushed out. I think, we would prefer, doing it the old-fashioned way, like Schoolhouse Rock, where the two sides conference. But the last 2 years, we did do ping pong and successfully got the bill across the finish line. So, again, I think the preference is really to have a full conference, but that doesn't mean we're up against it. I mean, we can still get it done.
Yeah. And I'm going to ping pong back from authorization to appropriations, since we were asking about the CR. You talked about an anomaly in there for the Columbia class, which is a huge acquisitions priority for the department. What about funding for the ongoing operations in the Mideast? We have 2 carriers there. We have troops under fire, various aircraft. Does that get funded? Are there other anomalies in this CR? And how are these ongoing operations going to wind up getting funded?
So it's pretty clean in terms of as it is. I mean, there's no question that the Navy is getting level funding, which they can use for operations. Again, the frustration and why CRs are bad. You can't fund government on automatic pilot using as an environment something 18 months ago, because the world has changed dramatically since then. But I think when we're talking January, I don't think there's going to be a problem in terms of being able to make sure that our carriers are able to operate without worrying about issues like that. But to Rob's point, we really have got to finish up the work and get a fully fleshed out FY24 budget, a real budget.
Yeah, there's nothing in the CR, but there's a lot of discussion about supplementals across a whole variety of different areas. It's more likely that you'll see this in a supplemental, just like the $3.4 billion for submarine industrial base. Joe and I have been fighting for that for years. We wish it had come years ago, but $3.4 billion now would be great, and I am really honored to be part of that effort to make sure we emphasize that. That's one of the things in the supplemental that I agree with. I think those are the places where we need to make things happen. And with all the other challenges that are out there, if we do that, as well as making sure that we have improvements to our shipyards, our ship repair yards, that's going to be key.
Yeah, it's like you're reading my questions here, because that's really where I wanted to go next. Just to assume that the audience here knows a fair bit about AUKUS, the 3-nation pact between the U.S., UK, and Australia. It's a massive agreement. The Pillar 1 is about sharing nuclear-powered submarine technology. Pillar 2 is about sharing other advanced technologies. But it's something that needs congressional support. There's legislation moving through Congress now, and so I wanted to ask the two of you. All 3 governments want that legislation to pass through Congress, but it's not necessarily a given. And I wanted to get a sense from, will it pass this year? Will that legislation be passed into law?
So I'm bullish. The reason why this has been a bit tricky is just that the legislative proposals came over late. I mean, they came over after the March announcement, the optimal pathway that set up the roadmap for sale of Virginia-class submarines, as well as technology sharing, as well as Defense Production Act sharing. So, I mean, we were well into NDAA markup when those arrived. They also went to other committees, primarily the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House and the Senate. So sort of trying to herd the cats to get them lined up to, hopefully be folded into NDAA has taken, definitely some three-dimensional chess, to mix my metaphors here, in terms of just trying to, get the pieces together. But, I think, again, because of the efforts of the Australian Embassy, the UK Embassy, the Navy, and others, I think this now has really risen to a much higher level of awareness of the leadership on the Armed Services Committees. And I think I'm really, very optimistic that we're going to, make some real strong progress with both pillars.
Are you as optimistic as?
Listen, I am. I think there's a lot of great things about AUKUS. One thing we know for certain, it has to result in a net increase in submarines between the three nations. Bottom line, we want to make sure, too, that it helps us in our industrial base, because our industrial base is going to help grow the Australian industrial base. We know they have to have organic capacity there to produce submarines. We know that in the interim, we're going to sell them submarines, but I think there needs to be a measure there to say, as we sell them submarines, they need to demonstrate certain milestones in organic capacity. Their governing officials agree. When we were there meeting with their members of parliament and Prime Minister Albanese and others, they're in agreement. They have to demonstrate to the Australians that they're doing this. So I think the enterprise is on track to do that. Do not underestimate the complexity and the toughness of this challenge for all of us. We want to make sure shipbuilders are here, their submariners are here, which they are, but it's going to take an all-hands-on-deck effort to make sure that this happens. And I think that folks are ready for it, but it's going to take a tremendous amount of resolve. And again, we need to be laser-focused on making sure that the net result of this are more submarines than what would happen if each nation did this enterprise.
So, last year, Rob and I actually co-sponsored an amendment to authorize the training of Australian naval officers, which was enacted in last year's NDAA, and we're now seeing that stewardship piece that you were talking about actually unfolding in real time. I mean, there have been already one, if not two, classes of graduates down in South Carolina at the training school down there, and
they're learning
basically how to operate and nuclear submarines. Again, they have a submarine force. It's just they've never had, that particular complex component of it. So I would also note Admiral Houston last week sort of laid out the timeline for the sale of the Virginia-class submarines. The first one will be 2032, the second 2035, and then the third, which will be a new constructed Virginia, will be 2038. That's actually, even in submarine shipbuilding years, that's a pretty good, runway in terms of making sure that all of the totally necessary items that Rob described, are actually going to be in place. In Australia, who I think is sort of watching to see how we deliver this year, I mean, they're prepared to put in $3 billion of their own money into the U.S. industrial base. We have to pass a law to actually allow them to do that. That is so unprecedented. Again, I think that the thinking that went into the optimal pathway, which took 18 months, really did a good job in terms of making this executable.
I'm getting that there's a lot of pressure to make the legislation happen, but there is a there is a little bit of a knot on tie here in that Senator Roger Wicker, the top Republican on Senate Armed Services, and other Republicans in the Senate are saying that the industrial base can't support the needs of the Navy and Australia to around those Virginia-class subs, and there need to be these investments, the ones that you had mentioned earlier, and now President Biden has proposed those investments, but I think that there's some open questions about how the package those investments are going to ride on are going to come together. So what makes you guys so confident that all of those pieces are going to fall into place before the end of the year?
Well, I think the progress that we've made so far. So if you take the supplemental request along with the dollars that the Australians will put in when this legislation passes, that's $6.4 billion. That's a big influx of dollars here. We know, based on this enterprise of building one Columbia class and two Virginia class, during a cycle, that's about 10,000 additional workers that our shipyards are going to have to add. If you were to ask me that question a year ago, I'd say that they'd be challenged to do that. They have caught up significantly, so they're adding to the workforce now, doing some really good things in those areas. I believe that they will get there. If you look at the trajectory that they are on, I think that they will get there. Let's not undersell, though, the challenge that they face and all the things that we have to do to make sure we send the demand signal there. What has happened through times is that Congress and administrations on both sides out have sent this roller coaster demand signal. You know, build a bunch of ships and then next year retire ships, and next year build ships. We've got to get off that roller coaster and send a steady demand signal to the industrial base. And we do have to grow the submarine industrial base. In many areas, it's precariously slim as far as capacity. And if we don't grow that, then we won't have the ability to do what we need to do.
And I think the most promising way that that's happening is that the strategic outsourcing to shipyards, not just to supply chain companies that provide components. So today down in Alabama at Austell, they're doing steel fabrication, which is a massive piece of the production process. Millions of man hours are going to be picked up through that one yard, but the same thing is going to be happening in Pennsylvania and South Carolina. So you're basically almost adding a third shipyard de facto by outsourcing and strategic outsourcing. That's basically allowing these other shipyards to participate in a much bigger way.
There's a CAPE study, Pentagon Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation Office study about what the industrial base needs in order to actually realize AUKUS. I take it you guys have you seen that study? What's in it? What does it say?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, listen, I've seen it. I think it highlights a lot of the weaknesses in the industrial base, things we have to grow, especially ship systems components. Many times there's only one supplier there. We have to be able to have a broader base of suppliers. And another thing too is labor, workforce. I mean, that's going to be key. I think we're moving in the right direction there, but we still have a ways to go. So I think the things that they have outlined are indeed the challenges. I don't think, though, that they're the only challenges. But listen, I'm like Joe. I'm bullish on us being able to meet the challenge ahead of us, both resource-wise and workforce-wise. I'm
going to move off the subs, but stay with shipbuilding. Were either of you surprised to see how much shipbuilding played a role in the Republican presidential debate? Vivek Ramaswamy had a number. Chris Christie called for a boost in the nuclear sub-presence. Ron DeSantis said 355 ships at the end of his first term, 385 by the end of his second term, a path to 600 after that. Was that surprising to you? And what is actually the right number?
All I've got to say is it's about time. It's about time. I think people understand the ability for us to influence bad actors around the world, that is, influence their behavior to being good actors, is centered around the United States Navy. I mean, this is the tip of the spear. Our Navy Marine Corps team has to have ships. Listen, our sailors and Marines are great, but until they can walk on water, we better be building them ships.
But is there a number, and what's the number, and is it feasible?
355 is what
that's
the law says.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also think, we know that the force architecture within that top line number is also, you got to be smart about this. And one of the reasons why submarines, I think, are becoming more a part of the conversation, and Christie himself, sort of foot stomped that in the debate, is just that, what we're seeing with advanced missile technology in the war in Ukraine, we've even seen it, in terms of the Russian Navy taking hits. With China, you can multiply that technology by a factor of about 1 million. So that's why, again, having the right types of ships, I think, is really important. Fast frigates, I think, is really something that is a result of that shifting perception. Mm-hmm. And again, like both of us probably feel like, we're prophets who have finally, been heard out there in terms of, where I think our country's priorities should be.
Yeah, and the requirement of 66 attack submarines won't be met until 2049. We got to move that number way to the left as fast as we can. We can do that. It's the one place where we still have tactical superiority against all of our adversaries around the world.
You've been to Australia recently. Do you feel like the Australians where are they at around this? Are they where they need to be?
So Prime Minister Albanese was just here in town, who is a Labour Party Prime Minister, who, again, his party is left of center. They are 1,000% support of AUKUS. They just had their big party conference, and they passed a resolution overwhelming in terms of doing that. And again, they have publicly stated a commitment of $360 billion into this enterprise. This is a country whose population is about the size of Texas. So really, and our proceedings are front page news in Australia in terms of what Congress is doing. So, and I think they conveyed, the fact that, they're watching us when they were in town.
All right, I think we're going to have to leave it there. My takeaway here is that both of you are very confident about the AUKUS legislation passing Congress this year. I want to thank you both for coming and speaking with us.
Thanks, Jim.
And I want to invite Editorial Director for Politico Live, Kevin Barron, back to the stage.